Well, Mark, we are finally here. We are finally just a few hours away from one of the most anticipated rematches in UFC history, one of the most anticipated fights in UFC history. Number one versus number two in the light heavyweight division, number one versus number two in the pound-for-pound rankings. We made it. And I thought it was apropos that Jon Jones said after fake weighing in the ceremonial weigh-ins right behind us inside the Honda Center, I made it to the event. How about that? This is very exciting. Hello again, everyone. It is I, Ariel Helwani. That is Marc Raimondi. We are doing this one more time before UFC 214. We are standing outside the Honda Center, site of tomorrow night's mega event, Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier 2 for the light heavyweight championship. This time it's DC going in as champion. And as of 6 p.m. Pacific on Friday evening, everything has remained intact. Now let me knock on his burly chest and just pray to the MMA gods that everything remains intact for the next 27 or so hours. But do you feel it? Describe the emotions. We've been through this before with these two. We are oh so close. What's going through your mind, Mark?
It's real now, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is actually going to happen. We've seen press conferences between these guys before. We've seen so many stare downs between these two guys before. But usually, if they make it to the ceremonial weigh-ins, they do end up having a fight the next day. Usually, for the most part.
I hate to be a stickler, but we just saw in the last pay-per-view two fighters make it to the ceremonial weigh-ins. Okay.
I said these guys.
Okay, these two.
I said
All right.
I said these guys. I know what happens, and I feel like I'm gonna be checking. I want to check my phone like during this preview show because you just never know. You just never know in this wacky world of MMA. But it felt real today. They got on stage. They faced off. It was a fantastic face-off, drama-filled. You could feel the tension in the air. No scuffles. Didn't need to be. It was great, and it's real. It's here, and we're actually going to see it tomorrow night.
They have only fought once before. That was UFC 182. They completely botched that face-off. Remember, Jon gave,
Right.
I don't know if he was giving us the back. No, he gave Cormier his back, and then Cormier gave the crowd his back. I mean, it was just an awkward moment.
Yep.
This time they nailed it. Cormier
100%.
walked up, didn't look at the crowd, looked straight at Jon. Jon was emotional walking on the stage. It really seemed like he was kind of overcome with emotion. He was finally back, smile on his face, hugged Dana White. To me, it was one of my favorite face-offs in this whole ceremonial weigh-in era of ours that we've seen. I mean, it just, again, you said it perfectly. Didn't need any scuffles, didn't need any back and forth. Jon blows him a kiss, and that was it. I thought it was phenomenal, and I feel it. What was the crowd like? What was the atmosphere like for those that didn't experience it? How would you describe it?
It was great. The crowd was fantastic today. The Orange County, because we actually are officially in Orange County.
We made
right
it.
now.
Okay.
We've made it here. I know that there have been some pratfalls along the way and some misidentifying of cities, but we're in Orange County, and it's just a huge scene for MMA, and the crowd came out today. And really, the one thing that I took away from the weigh-ins and just all week that I forgot is just the star presence of Jon Jones. He has a certain aura about him. He feels like a star. Not every fighter, when they come into the room, all eyes are on them. But Jon Jones, when he got up there today at the weigh-ins, the entire building was focused dead on Jon Jones because he's just that type of star and has that kind of charisma.
He plays it up very nicely as well. He knows how to play it up. What'd you make of their physiques? Because the big question going into this was, how would Daniel Cormier look? Well, he made the weight and seemed to make the weight relatively easily, at least for him. His new nutritionist, Tyler Minton, said that it went rather smoothly. Jon appears to be in phenomenal shape despite the layoff. Overall, how would you assess how they looked on the scale?
They looked great. That was really this morning when they weighed in officially. Of course, this was the ceremonial weigh-ins just a few minutes ago, but they both look great. Their physiques are great, and really that was a Daniel Cormier issue. The last fight, admittedly, was not as disciplined, I guess you could say, as he should have been, and he said that. And this fight was a different story for a number of reasons, as we touched on yesterday. And just for people who don't know, you had tweeted yesterday that Cormier said he was 7.5 pounds over yesterday, and a lot of people said, "Well, whoa, he's not taking it seriously. That's so far off." It's actually not. This weird world of weight cutting that is 7.5 pounds is actually not a lot of water to cut for a man who's 205 pounds or whatever he was yesterday, 212 pounds, and he looked great today. We did a comparison on our Instagram of UFC 210 Daniel Cormier and today's Daniel Cormier. Definitely a noted difference. I think he looks great, and I think that will not be an issue in the fight at all.
Yeah, I thought he looked the best that he's ever looked as far as his era as a light heavyweight, and certainly much better than he did back in April
Yeah.
when he had trouble making weight and needed maybe some assistance from some foreign objects to make that weight. How would you describe just the buzz here? Because someone was telling me before the weigh-ins that they don't think this pay-per-view will do over 1 million, in large part because we have been teased before. We have almost seen these guys fight, what, 4 or 5 times now, if you count all the bookings in the past. Do you feel like the fans have finally accepted that this is happening, or do you still feel some hesitation in the audience?
Yeah, I still feel a little bit of hesitation, honestly. I think that everyone really wants to see this fight. I think that much is obvious, but there have been some false starts in the UFC lately, not even just Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. Like you said, the last event, everyone is excited to see Amanda Nunes against Valentina Shevchenko. They weigh in, everything seems fine, and then all of a sudden Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, the fight is off because Nunes gets sick. I think there is some buyer's remorse going on right now with people who buy UFC pay-per-views and buy tickets because for whatever reason, weird things keep happening and fights keep falling off at the 11th hour. It's happened. It seems like it's happened a lot, right? Even Khabib Nurmagomedov, another big pay-per-view this year, fell off the day before the fight. So I think that I feel like as it gets closer, the tension will grow and the excitement will grow. Even though we're only about 24 hours away right now, I don't know if it's there yet. But if it happens, if we can get through tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon and they're going to fight, don't forget, no one buys a pay-per-view the day before.
Sure.
No one buys pay-per-view the morning of, for the most part. You buy it pretty much an hour within, it actually happening. And if it stays together, I think they'll do quite well.
Curious to get your take on this question. Who has more pressure on his shoulders going into this fight? Who has to deliver? Of course, we know it's at stake. We know it's Daniel Cormier versus Jon Jones. We know Cormier is the champion. We know that he lost to him at 182.
Yeah.
But considering what has happened leading up to this fight, who has more pressure on their shoulders?
Man, that is a great question. That really is a really good question. I want to say it's Jon Jones. I want to say it's Jon Jones because we haven't seen him in so long. We haven't seen him in so long, and even he said in that great promo the UFC did, I need to get my life back. Like, the belt is very meaningful to him. On Embedded this week, you can see him. He brought a belt with him to his workout so he could look at it during the workout. Now, that says something. Maybe that says that is a major part of his life. It's a piece that's missing from his life right now, and because of all the things that he's been through, and the admitted drug addiction and the hit and run and all that stuff, I think he feels like this is the next step of him getting his life back together, and that's why I feel like he has the most pressure. But of course, Daniel Cormier has a ton of pressure on him as well.
Yeah, I actually agree with your sentiment because Cormier has already lost to Jon Jones. He did become champion, so he was able to cross that off the bucket list. Jon is looking to almost regain his legacy and reassert what he once was. DC has already cemented himself. This is almost gravy. Now, I do agree, Cormier wins, he's in the discussion for greatest of all time. It's tied 1-1. You get the trilogy fight. But in a way, there feels like there's almost more at stake here for Jon because he lost so much and he's trying to gain it all back. So the first time they fought, UFC 182, you look back, you say Jon won 4 rounds to 1, probably, right? That's the consensus, I think. I don't know if you agree. Do you remember scoring it that way? Okay. And if you tell someone that, they'll say, okay, it was a rather one-sided fight. That doesn't tell the story. The first 3 rounds in particular were very close, and I remember watching, in particular, the first 2 rounds. They fought them at a frenetic pace. It was almost like dizzying to watch them. How do you see this one play out? Do you think it has that same kind of pace? What does Daniel do? What does Jon do? How do you see it playing out? How do you envision this one playing out?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Cormier said after that fight was that he brought the anger with him. And with the anger brought a lot of energy expenditure in the first 3 rounds, and I thought DC did great the first 3 rounds, and I thought it was almost an even fight at that point. And then of course Jon took over in the last 2 rounds. Cardio is a big deal. Cardio is a big deal in this fight. It's probably going to go 5 rounds, and whoever has the cardio there in those championship rounds is really going to be the one who's going to be, I think, favored in my eyes. And if DC can keep the pace maybe a little bit slower than he did than the first time, because it's been a while since Jon Jones fought, but the guy just doesn't get tired. I mean, it's like it's almost it's just uncanny, his cardio. Is he the same guy that he was back then? The guy that fought Ovince St. Preux didn't look quite the same way as the old Jon Jones did. There are so many question marks, which kind of furthers the intrigue. But I think that it'll be a little bit slower paced than it was. That was a long way to answer your question. I think it'll be slower paced.
I'm almost throwing out the OSP fight. Let's not forget he was involved with
Yeah,
more legal troubles like just
weeks before
So I mean, just looking at his physique, and I know that doesn't tell the entire story, he appears to be in phenomenal shape. So officially, Marc Raimondi's prediction for Saturday night's main event is.
I've gone back and forth all week. I really have. And I don't like to make predictions until after the weigh-ins to see how they look, and I think both of them look great, so that didn't help me at all. But I can't pick against Jon Jones just because the guy's never lost. I know he has that dumb that loss on his record, that dumb number in that loss column that to me doesn't really count. Can't pick against Jon Jones because we've never seen the man lose, and you got to use history to predict, right? And I've never seen Jon Jones lose. I just can't pick him to lose here. I think he's going to win.
Okay. Does he finish him? Or does it go the distance?
It goes the distance.
All right.
Yeah.
So decision like the first fight. All right, let's talk about the co-main event now. Phenomenal matchup. UFC welterweight title on the line. It's Tyron Woodley versus Demian Maia. My sense is this isn't a great matchup for Maia. We know what he wants to do. Get the fight to the ground. Unfortunately, he's fighting a wrestler who has developed into a great striker. Although Maia said recently that he actually really likes this matchup because he thinks that Woodley has been favoring his striking too much and is open for the takedown. Do you subscribe to the notion that this is a really bad matchup in a title fight for Maia, or do you think there's something to what he has been saying?
It's definitely not a great matchup for Demian Maia. It's definitely a worse matchup than some of his previous fights on this win streak that he's been on. But I don't think it's necessarily the worst possible matchup. I think that he'll have opportunities to take it to the ground, and even Woodley said in the scrum yesterday at Open Workouts that he wouldn't say that I won't be taken down. He's almost expecting at some point, for whatever reason, in a scramble to be taken down because of the unorthodox ways that Maia does that kind of thing. It's not just a regular double leg. He's pulling guard. He's doing a kind of a deep half sweep, that kind of thing. So I think if you look at Maia's fights, a lot of times the first round, second round looks great. He looks excellent. And then he kind of slows down. I think in a 5-round fight, that could really magnify itself. And I think that Woodley will probably win late. You haven't asked me for my prediction yet, but I'm giving it to you anyway.
All right, wow.
I think Maia early, Woodley late, and Woodley winning a decision.
You know, it has been almost exactly 1 year since Tyron Woodley became champion, July 30th of 2016. What a year he has had. Fought at MSG, had the rematch, now fighting on this big card. Who knows? If he wins this fight, maybe it's GSP and MSG in November, although I still have my doubts. My point is, do you feel like he is starting to develop? There always seems to be, when a guy comes up the ranks, becomes champion, a couple fights before he develops that aura. And I thought yesterday, at the scrum in particular, he started to show off that aura. He had a chip on his shoulder, said, I'm the best welterweight ever. I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk. Something felt a little different. Do you agree?
I do. I felt a different intensity in him. It's not the same old Tyron Woodley who was a contender trying to get that belt. Now that he is the champion, he definitely has a different attitude about him. And I think you need that, right? I think you need that ego. Let's be honest. I mean, if you're going to fight at this level, you have to have some kind of. There's no such thing as an egoless UFC champion, because how do you get in there and perform against another man in a cage if you don't have an ego about you? So I think that this is a new Woodley, and I think it's a good sign for him. He seems incredibly confident, but I also think that part of him knows that. Yeah, he's defended the belt now. We've seen him defend it twice, but the first fight was very close. It was a draw. It wasn't a win. The second fight was very close, and also not a whole lot of things happened in that fight against Wonder Boy the second time. So I think he really knows that this is his chance to solidify, put a stamp on that welterweight title, and prove to people who I think are still doubting that he is the best 170-pound fighter in the world.
Considering Maia's road to this title fight, considering the fact that they gave him this title fight on 1 month's notice, and it wasn't because of an injury or a replacement situation, do you think he might fight desperately because he knows that this is probably his last crack at a title? Do you think that he will do anything different, or is he just not that kind of fighter?
I think Maia kind of does fight desperately early on in fights. Okay. He goes for broke in trying to get the fight to the ground, trying to get his opponents back, and I think we'll see something like that. And only having 5 weeks to prepare, again, it makes me wonder about the cardio issues. And the people have said that Woodley has had cardio issues in the past, but if you look at Maia's fights, it's pretty clear. He does great early on, and then as the fight goes, he's just not as strong. Happened kind of against Masvidal as well in his last fight. So I think that he will fight desperately, but that could be to the detriment of his cardio.
Okay, let's talk now about the third title fight on this card. It's Cris Cyborg versus Tanya Evinger for the vacant women's featherweight title. Of course, Jermaine Durandamy won the belt in the inaugural women's featherweight title fight back in February in Brooklyn, New York. She defeated Holly Holm via a controversial decision. She was stripped of the belt after she refused to defend it against Chris Cyborg, and now we're getting the title fight that we wanted to see, in the sense that we didn't really care about the opponent. We just wanted to see Chris Cyborg fight for a UFC belt. She's getting that opportunity, and I wondered if Tonya Evinger, who very much deserves to be here. This is kind of an Invicta super fight. She was the Invicta Bantamweight champion. Cyborg was the Invicta Women's Featherweight champion. Or I should just say the Invicta Featherweight champion. You don't have to add the word women's there. My point is, I was wondering whether Evinger would maybe get a little nervous under the lights. Maybe fighting Cyborg for a belt in her UFC debut on such a big pay-per-view would rattle the veteran. However, speaking to her on Wednesday, I did not get that sense from her at all. She gives no Fs. She is not rattled by this at all.
Yeah.
Does she have it in her to pull off this upset, or is Cyborg just too good?
I think she does. I think she has it in her. I think that Tonya Evinger is someone that, even though she's been around for so long, she really is a women's MMA pioneer. She's been doing it for for such a long time that, I mean, I don't even know how much she was getting paid for some of those early fights. It was so long ago where there was no women's MMA, and even though that she's been well tenured, is not super well known yet to the UFC audience. The Invicta fans obviously know how good she is, but I think people have forgotten. Y'all must have forgot how good Tonya Evinger is. She's a great wrestler, and she's a style matchup that maybe Cyborg has not seen in a long time. A durable, grinding wrestler. So I think at this stage, with the available options presented, and there are not that many at 145 pounds for women, I think Tonya Evinger is one of the toughest matchups that you can put in front of Cyborg right now.
Okay, so what's her path to victory? How does she get it done?
She can grind it out. I mean, get it to the ground. When was the last time we saw Cyborg on the ground? I don't remember the last time we saw Chris Cyborg on the ground.
It's been a couple of years.
It's been a couple of years. I mean, we know that she's great at jiu-jitsu. I mean, we know that she's shown that in the past, but can she deal with a wrestler of the caliber of Evinger? She was an excellent wrestler, an amateur wrestler, and she's taken that into her MMA game, and she's just very durable and kind of wily and gritty on the ground. Like, she just makes it a messy, dirty fight, and there hasn't been anyone like that against Cyborg in a long time, and I'm super curious to see how that plays out.
Cyborg made weight. She always looks a little sunken in, not as bad as 140, but she seemed to be in good spirits. She is a massive favorite. Could you imagine if the first two women's featherweight champions in UFC history are Jermaine Durandamy and Tonya Evinger? Do you think this happens, or is Cyborg going to continue to roll? I believe she has not lost in 12 years.
Yeah, she has not. 2005, her pro debut was her last loss. I still have to pick Cyborg because, I mean, kind of the same thing. Maybe it's a cop-out with just history being the predictor for the future. I think that Cyborg wins. I think that it's going to be a tougher matchup than some people think.
Okay.
Maybe she shouldn't be as big of a favorite as she is, because Evinger, again, is not that well known, but I'm still going to pick Cyborg. I think she'll finish.
Early?
Second round.
Okay. And you know what's fascinating, something that hasn't been talked about a lot, Cyborg's contract is up in October, and she has not re-signed. Could you imagine Cyborg, and we know she likes to march to the beat of her own drum, could you imagine she wins the belt and all bets are off? It's never dull with Cyborg. Always some kind of drama. First, let's see what happens on Saturday. Let me ask you about Robbie Lawler versus Donald Cerrone. What do you make of Robbie Lawler's demeanor all week long? They have squared off twice thus far, and both times he kind of always has this demeanor like he doesn't really care to be here, but it's almost been magnified. He's one step below when he was falling asleep at press conferences. What do you make of it?
It's worked for him in the past.
Yeah,
it's worked for him in the past.
But this seems a little more than usual, right? Or
maybe,
at least it stands out more to me.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe this is not the ideal fight for him at this stage. I know that he's got some, obviously, personal things that are probably taking up some part of his mind right now, and you don't want to do that when you're going to go up against Cowboy Cerrone, of course, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative. This is still Robbie Lawler we're talking about. The guy is just got ice water in his veins. Like, I think we're maybe analyzing a little bit too much.
Fair enough. It's a fantastic fight. It's a fight fans have been clamoring for. They tried to make it back in November, first MSG show, then they tried to make it in July.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Cerrone had the infection, groin injury, and now we're getting it. It's so much fun, and I feel like the expectations are so high. Yeah. However, I kind of feel like, given their styles and given the way they fight, this one could actually exceed the expectations. Do you agree?
Man, that is such a great fight. I mean, if you're just fantasy booking, as soon as Donald Cerrone got to the welterweight division, which I think is a better division for him, one of the first things you got to say is, like, wow, imagine if they can find a way to book Cowboy Cerrone versus Robbie Lawler, and now it's actually here. And the crazy thing is that it's on a card that it's not getting probably the attention that it deserves. But man, tomorrow at 8 Pacific, when we're sitting down and watching that fight, it's going to be like, man, wow, holy, this is actually going to happen. This is going to be incredible.
Lawler's team has been saying we don't get this fight. There's
Yeah.
nothing for us to gain. I don't necessarily agree. He is coming off a loss, 1 year layoff, fun style matchup, get people excited. How do you feel about what they've been saying about this fight?
I think he has plenty to gain. Now, it's a hard matchup, of course. There's no doubt about it. But Robbie Lawler wins this fight. I think he's right back in the mix for the title. I mean, if he really even cares about that kind of thing, I'm sure he probably does because of the money potential that's in that, you know, for a
So look at the rankings. There's not that many people between him and the top.
Right, because, I mean, I know that they're saying that George St. Pierre is going to be next for the Woodley Maia winner, but again, GSP Bisping still seems like it's kind of lying out there, and it could happen. So if that happens, and Lawler wins, who's the number one contender? It's probably Robbie Lawler.
Right. All right, so your official prediction?
I'm going to take Robbie Lawler.
Okay. And is he finishing him?
Decision.
Okay, another decision. Interesting. One more on the main card, Volkan Ozdemir against Jimmy Manuwa, a very important fight in the light heavyweight division. Volkan telling me yesterday that he thinks he's going to knock out Jimmy in the first round. Does this happen?
It could. I mean,
of course it could, but does it happen?
He just knocked out Misha Cirkunov in
28 seconds.
28 seconds, and this is a guy that no one heard of this guy at the beginning of the year.
8 months ago.
8 months ago, he beat OSP and he beat Cirkunov, and those are two of the top, certainly top 10, maybe top 5 light heavyweights in the world. Now he's fighting Jimmy Manuwa. Man, I'm curious to see how the guy looks. He's so little known that at the scrum yesterday at Open Workouts, John Jones was asked about Volkan Ozdemir, and John Jones said, and very confidently I might add, he said, I don't know much about Volkan. I haven't watched his fights. The two things I do know is that he's very tough and he's Russian. Well, Volkan Ozdemir is not Russian.
He is tough, but he's not Russian.
But he is very tough, so Jones was half right. But that just speaks to how little he's known. He's come out of nowhere in a division where a lot of the guys have been around for a while, the Gustafsons, the Cormiers, the John Joneses. He's a new face, and that's a great thing, I think.
Unless DC wins and they do an immediate third fight between Jones and DC, I think Gustafsson is next. However, the winner of this fight is oh so close. Who are you picking?
I'm still going to have to take Manuwa.
Okay.
I think he's looked really, really good lately. He's training with Gustafsson at All-Stars in Sweden. I think his hands look great. Still wants to box David Hay. I'm not so sure about that one.
I'm not feeling that.
I'm not feeling that
He's
as
so
much.
close to a title shot.
I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe it's some kind of Brit thing. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think he gets the job done against Ozdemir.
Knockout?
Is it Ozdemir or Ozdemir?
I say Ozdemir. Are you saying Ozdemir?
Tomato.
Yeah.
Volkan is.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Might call this a preview show off. Anyway, I like Manuwa in that fight.
All right,
Volkan.
But wait, is he going to finish him? That was my question. You said that already.
I think he does. First round.
Okay, wow. So he's going to do what Volkan's saying. Okay, and then finally, stat card, top to bottom, so many great fights. Sterling, Barao, Knight, Lamas, etc., etc. Any other fight you want to talk about that you're really looking forward to on the prelims?
Man, there really are so many. Jason Knight is just a guy that intrigues me so much because he's such a different type of fighter, and I think he has a bright future. But Ricardo Lamas has been one of the top guys at 145 for a long time. That's super exciting. I kind of have that one circled as far as the prelim. But Aljo Sterling against Henan Barao at 140, by the way, catchweight fight. That's I mean, it's not at 135, but it's going to be very meaningful for that division.
Sure. The time for talking is over, my friends. Hours away now from the most anticipated fight card of the year, DC versus Jones 2. I think it's going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the MMA gods are going to smile down upon us here in Orange County and deliver the fight that we have been talking and dreaming about for the last almost 3 years, 2.5 years to be exact. No news?
Nothing bad has happened yet.
Nothing bad has happened. That is good. See, that's where his head is at. I'm staying on the positive side of things. We appreciate you watching our coverage all week long from here in LA, La Mirada, LA County, Cerritos, Orange County, Anaheim, all over the place here in SoCal. Thank you so much for sticking with us, and we will see you on Saturday for all your usual fight night coverage, photos, news notes, live blogs, videos, all that stuff and more. So don't go anywhere. Enjoy UFC 214. You deserve it. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you after the fights.